Imagine discovering something so massive, so precisely engineered, so impossibly ancient that it defies every known record of human history, hidden directly beneath your feet for over 2,000 years. This is not a tale of some distant, exotic location whispered about in legends. This is the true story of the Longyou Caves, a complex of hand-carved underground chambers in Zhejiang Province, China, that appeared out of nowhere in 1992, shocking the world and baffling every expert who has studied them since. These caves represent one of the greatest archaeological mysteries ever uncovered, an enigma so profound that despite decades of research, we still cannot answer the most basic questions. Who built them? When were they constructed? Why do they exist? And perhaps, most disturbing of all, how did a project of this magnitude completely vanish from the historical record? The story begins on an ordinary summer day in June 1992 in the small rural village of Xianbeikun, nestled in the rolling hills of Zhejiang Province. A local farmer named Wu Anai stood knee-deep in murky water, working alongside his neighbors to pump out a series of ponds that had existed in their village for as long as anyone could remember. These ponds, locals believed, were bottomless, impossibly deep, the subject of village folklore and children's ghost stories. No one had ever seen the bottom. No one had ever questioned what might lie beneath the dark, still water. Wu and his fellow villagers had decided to drain the ponds to expand their farmland, to create space for fish farming, to make practical use of land that had been unusable for generations. It was a routine agricultural project, nothing more, the kind of community effort that happens in farming villages across the world every single day. The pumps ran for hours, draining thousands of gallons of water. The level dropped slowly at first, then faster. Wu watched as mud began to appear where there had only been water. He waded in deeper, feeling his boots sink into the soft bottom, expecting to find clay, silt, perhaps some old fishing equipment lost by previous generations. But then his foot struck something that made him stop. It was not mud. It was not soft earth. It was hard, smooth, impossibly flat. He reached down through the remaining water, scraping away the mud with his hands, and his fingers traced the unmistakable edge of carved stone. Not a natural rock formation, not a random boulder, but a deliberately shaped, precisely angled surface. His heart began to race. He called to the others. They came running, splashing through the shallows, and together they dug, they scraped, they pulled away centuries of accumulated sediment. And there, emerging from the mud like a ghost materializing from fog, was a staircase. Stairs carved into solid rock, each step uniform, each edge sharp, descending down into darkness, into the unknown, into impossibility. Wu Anai did not know it yet, but he had just opened a door that had been sealed for more than 2 millennia. As the remaining water drained away completely, the stairs continued downward, further than any of them could have imagined. They grabbed flashlights, lanterns, anything that would provide light, and they began to descend. The air grew cooler with every step. The sound of their footsteps echoed strangely, bouncing off unseen walls in the darkness below. And then, as they reached the bottom and raised their lights, the beams caught something that made every one of them freeze in stunned silence. They were standing inside an enormous chamber, a vast underground hall carved entirely out of solid sandstone bedrock. The ceiling soared 18 meters above their heads, supported by massive stone pillars left standing during the excavation process. The walls stretched 46 meters in length, 34 meters in width. Every surface, every square inch of the walls, the pillars, the ceiling was covered in parallel chisel marks, precise diagonal grooves carved at a perfect 60-degree angle, spaced evenly apart, continuing in unbroken patterns across the entire space. This was not a natural cave. This was not a simple mine. This was architecture. This was engineering. This was art. And no one, absolutely no one, had any record that it existed. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Within days, researchers from across China descended on the village. What they found defied belief. Wuanai's pond was not an isolated anomaly. As teams began draining the other ponds in the area, they discovered more chambers. And more. And more. By the time the initial survey was complete, they had uncovered 24 massive underground chambers spread across an area equivalent to 4 soccer fields, each one meticulously hand-carved from the bedrock, each one featuring the same mysterious chisel patterns, the same soaring pillars, the same architectural precision. The scale was staggering. Experts calculated that more than 1 million cubic meters of stone had been removed to create these spaces. 1 million cubic meters. To put that in perspective, that volume of material is roughly equivalent to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Someone, at some point in ancient history, had undertaken a construction project of pharaonic proportions, and they had done it entirely underground, in complete secrecy, without leaving a single trace in the historical record. But the mystery deepened the more researchers examined the site. The precision of the construction was unlike anything seen in other ancient Chinese structures. The ceiling of each cave was carved at a precise 45-degree angle, creating a distinctive, sloped roof that had remained structurally sound for over 2,000 years. The walls between adjacent chambers were sometimes as thin as 50 centimeters, yet despite this minimal separation, none of the caves had collapsed into each other, even after enduring centuries of earthquakes, floods, and geological shifts. The engineering knowledge required to achieve this level of precision, to calculate the load-bearing capacity of thin rock walls separating massive voids, to design a drainage system that would prevent flooding, suggested a sophistication that seemed impossible for the tools available during the suspected time period. Most baffling of all, the caves showed no evidence of how they were constructed. There were no construction tools left behind, no broken chisels, no abandoned scaffolding, no pottery shards from workers' meals, no charcoal from torches, no bones from animals used for labor. Nothing. It was as if whoever built these caves had not only completed the work, but had then systematically erased every trace of their presence. The absence of historical documentation is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire mystery. China has one of the longest continuous historical records of any civilization on Earth, with detailed chronicles dating back thousands of years. Chinese emperors employed official historians whose sole purpose was to record significant events, construction projects, military campaigns, and cultural achievements. Yet nowhere in this vast archive of documentation is there a single reference to the Longyou Caves. Not one sentence. Not one mention of a massive underground construction project in Zhejiang Province. Not one record of the labor force required, the resources expended, or the purpose intended. For a project of this magnitude to completely escape historical documentation is not just unusual, it is unprecedented. Some researchers have suggested that perhaps the project was classified, a secret military installation or imperial refuge deliberately kept hidden from public knowledge. But even classified imperial projects typically left some record in palace documents, court memorials, or private writings of officials. The Longyou Caves left nothing. The initial carbon dating attempts failed because there was no organic material to test. The caves had been completely scoured clean. Archaeologists tried to estimate the age based on the weathering patterns of the stone, the geological deposits, the style of chisel marks. The consensus settled on approximately 2,000 years old, placing construction sometime during the late Warring States period or early Western Han Dynasty, roughly between 200 BCE and 100 BCE. But this is an educated guess, not a confirmed fact. Without datable artifacts, without inscriptions, without any physical evidence beyond the carved stone itself, the true age of the Longyou Caves remains speculative. They could be older, They could be younger. We simply do not know. And that uncertainty gnaws at the foundation of everything we think we understand about ancient Chinese history. As word of the discovery spread beyond academic circles, the Longyou Caves became a sensation. Media outlets dubbed them the ninth wonder of the ancient world, a title that captured public imagination but did little to answer the fundamental questions. Tourists began arriving by the thousands, descending the same stairs Wu and I had first uncovered, walking through the same vast chambers, running their hands over the same precise chisel marks. The local government, recognizing the economic potential, developed several of the caves into a formal tourist attraction, installing lights, walkways, and informational displays. But even as visitors marveled at the scale and craftsmanship, the experts remained deeply troubled. Every new investigation seemed to raise more questions than it answered. Every theory proposed to explain the caves quickly encountered insurmountable problems. The mystery of the missing stone became one of the most vexing puzzles. 1 million cubic meters of sandstone had been carved out of the ground and removed. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of material. If you loaded that stone into standard dump trucks, you would need over 60,000 truckloads. If ancient workers carried it out in baskets, the number of trips would be astronomical. Yet there is no evidence of where all that stone went. Archaeologists have surveyed the surrounding area for kilometers in every direction, searching for ancient quarry dumps, stone structures that might have been built with the excavated material, or any geological anomaly that might indicate where the stone was deposited. They have found nothing. The stone simply vanished as if it evaporated into thin air. Some researchers have speculated that perhaps the stone was used to build structures that no longer exist, buildings that were destroyed by war, weathering, or deliberate demolition. Others suggest it might have been dumped into the nearby Q River and washed away over centuries. But neither explanation accounts for the complete absence of any trace evidence, any historical mention, any archaeological remnant. The technical challenges of the construction are equally mystifying. The chisel marks covering every surface of the caves show a remarkable consistency. They run in parallel lines, spaced approximately 10 to 15 centimeters apart, carved at a uniform 60-degree angle, maintained with precision across hundreds of square meters of surface area. Modern stonemasons who have examined these marks are astounded by the uniformity. To achieve this level of consistency across such a vast area would require either an enormous workforce all trained to the exact same technique, or a smaller group working for an incredibly extended period while somehow maintaining perfect discipline and consistency. Neither scenario seems plausible given the tools available in ancient China. Bronze implements of the suspected time period would have dulled quickly against sandstone, requiring constant resharpening or replacement. Yet there is no evidence of a metalworking facility nearby, no slag heaps from bronze production, no discarded tools. The workers would have needed a massive supply of chisels, hammers, and other implements. Where did these tools come from? Where did they go? Then there is the problem of light. The caves are located deep underground, some chambers extending more than 30 meters below the surface. Working in such spaces would have required artificial illumination. In ancient times, this would typically mean torches, oil lamps, or other fire-based lighting. But here is the problem. The ceilings of the Longyou Caves show absolutely no evidence of smoke damage. No soot deposits, no blackening from torch flames, no carbon residue from oil lamps. The stone is clean. Some researchers have proposed that perhaps the workers used a sophisticated system of mirrors to reflect sunlight down into the chambers, an ingenious solution that would avoid the smoke problem entirely. But no evidence of such a mirror system has been found, and the logistics of maintaining adequate light in chambers this deep using only reflected sunlight seems extraordinarily difficult. Others have suggested that perhaps the caves were excavated from the top down, with the roof left open to admit daylight until the very end of the project, at which point the roof would be carved and sealed. But geological analysis of the chisel marks suggests that work proceeded from the bottom up and from the inside out, exactly the opposite direction. The lighting mystery remains unsolved. Wu and I, The farmer who made that first discovery has been interviewed many times over the years. Now an elderly man, he still lives in the village, and he sometimes visits the caves that bear his name in local parlance. He has said in interviews that he never imagined that draining a simple pond would lead to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the modern era. He has also said that despite all the researchers, all the tourists, all the attention, he feels that the caves have kept their secrets. They remain as mysterious today as they were on that summer day in 1992 when he first scraped away the mud and found those impossible stairs. And perhaps that is the most profound aspect of the Longyou Caves. In an age when we have mapped the human genome, landed rovers on Mars, and developed artificial intelligence, we still cannot answer basic questions about a structure built by our own ancestors. We cannot say who built it. We cannot say why. We cannot even prove definitively when it was made. The Longyou Caves stand as a humbling reminder that the past is not a closed book, that history still holds secrets, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not hidden in distant galaxies, but buried just beneath our feet, waiting in darkness for someone brave enough or curious enough to drain the pond and descend the stairs into the unknown. But to truly comprehend the impossibility of the Longyou Caves, we must first understand their staggering scale, a magnitude so vast that it challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient construction capabilities. When archaeologists completed their initial survey of the site, measuring every chamber, calculating every dimension, analyzing every structural element, the numbers they produced seemed almost fictional. These were not small rooms, not modest cellars, not simple storage spaces carved opportunistically into convenient rock formations. These were architectural monuments on a scale that rivals the most ambitious projects of the ancient world, hidden entirely underground, invisible from the surface, unknown to history. Cave number 2, the largest and most extensively studied of the complex, measures 46 meters in length, 34 meters in width, and 18 meters in height at its peak. To stand in the center of this chamber is to experience a sense of space that seems impossible for an underground structure. The ceiling soars above you like a cathedral, the walls stretch away into shadow, the pillars supporting the roof are as thick as ancient trees. 18 meters is the height of a 6-story building. Imagine carving a 6-story building out of solid rock, by hand, using only Bronze Age tools, in complete darkness, without leaving any trace of how you did it. The mental image alone strains credibility. Yet here it stands, and it has stood for approximately 2,000 years, weathering earthquakes, floods, and the slow grinding pressure of geological time, without collapsing, without significant degradation, without failure. The total volume of the 24 caves exceeds 30,000 cubic meters of interior space, carved from bedrock that required the removal of more than 1 million cubic meters of stone. These numbers are difficult for the human mind to process in the abstract, so let us make them concrete. 1 million cubic meters is equivalent to approximately 2.7 million tons of sandstone, assuming typical density for the rock in this region. If you were to load this stone into standard 40-ton capacity dump trucks, you would need 67,500 individual truckloads to remove it all. If ancient workers carried the stone out in baskets, each basket holding perhaps 20 kilograms of material, they would need to make over 135 million trips up and down those stairs, each trip carrying a load of broken rock, each trip in complete or near-complete darkness, each trip requiring the worker to navigate narrow passages, steep stairs, and cramped working conditions. The logistical challenge alone is staggering. Modern engineers who have studied the Longyou Caves have attempted to calculate how long such a project would have required. The estimates vary depending on assumptions about workforce size, tool efficiency, and working hours per day, but most calculations converge on a range of several years to several decades. If we assume a workforce of 1,000 laborers working in rotating shifts, 24 hours per day, every day of the year, Using bronze tools that would need constant sharpening and replacement, the project would still require a minimum of 6 years to complete. 6 years of continuous excavation, 6 years of hauling stone, 6 years of feeding and housing workers, 6 years of organizing logistics, 6 years of maintaining discipline and consistency across hundreds of workers, all performing the same task in the same manner. And this assumes optimal conditions, perfect efficiency, no accidents, no delays, no interruptions from war, famine, disease, or political upheaval. But here is where the mystery deepens into something truly disturbing. Despite the fact that such a project would have required thousands of workers over many years, there is absolutely no archaeological evidence of their presence. No living quarters for the workers, no cooking hearths, no trash pits, no burial sites for workers who died during construction, no tools dropped and abandoned, no graffiti scratched into walls during breaks, no personal belongings left behind, no evidence whatsoever that any human being ever lived, worked, ate, slept, or died at this location during the construction period. The site is archaeologically sterile, cleaner than sites that were occupied for a single day, devoid of the casual debris that accumulates wherever humans gather. It is as if the workers were ghosts, present only in the physical evidence of their labor, absent from every other form of evidence that would normally confirm their existence. The architectural precision of the caves compounds the mystery. Every chamber follows the same basic design template, a pattern so consistent across all 24 caves that it suggests either a single master architect who designed the entire complex or a set of detailed plans that were followed with extraordinary discipline. The ceilings are uniformly sloped at 45 degrees, creating a distinctive angled roof that serves both structural and aesthetic purposes. The pillars supporting the roof are positioned according to a clear geometric logic, placed at intervals that distribute weight efficiently while creating visual rhythm and symmetry. The walls are never random in their shape or placement. Each cave has a carefully considered internal geometry, and the positioning of caves relative to each other shows evidence of sophisticated planning. Some caves are separated by less than 1 meter of stone, thin walls that would collapse instantly if the excavation had been careless or unplanned. Yet these walls have held for 2 millennia. This brings us to one of the most technically impressive aspects of the entire complex. The fact that adjacent caves can be separated by walls as thin as 50 centimeters without structural failure requires an extraordinary understanding of geology, load distribution, and material stress. Modern engineers use computer modeling, ground-penetrating radar, and advanced mathematics to calculate safe distances between underground excavations. The builders of the Longyou Caves had none of these tools, yet they achieved results that meet or exceed modern safety standards. They knew somehow exactly how thin they could make these walls without risking catastrophic collapse. They understood the bearing strength of sandstone under compression. They anticipated the lateral forces that would be exerted by the weight of the earth above. They designed a structure that has survived multiple major earthquakes, events that have destroyed buildings, bridges, and other structures on the surface above. How did they acquire this knowledge? Where did they test their theories? And why is there no evidence of this engineering expertise in any other structure from the same period? The drainage system within the caves demonstrates equal sophistication. Water infiltration is the death of underground structures. Most ancient mines and excavations eventually flooded, collapsed, or became unusable as water seeped through cracks, pooled in low areas, and gradually eroded the structural integrity of walls and supports. The Longyou Caves have a built-in drainage system that has kept them largely dry for 2,000 years. Channels carved into the floor direct water toward specific collection points. The slope of the floors, subtle but measurable, ensures that water flows away from critical structural elements. The design accounts for seasonal flooding, for typhoon rains, for groundwater seepage. Whoever built these caves understood hydrology, understood water flow, understood how to prevent the slow destruction that water inevitably causes in underground spaces. This is not primitive engineering. This is advanced civil engineering applied with precision and foresight. Yet, despite this obvious sophistication, despite evidence of knowledge that should have been widespread and foundational to other construction projects of the era, we find no parallel examples. There are no other underground complexes in China from this period that show similar engineering principles. There are no contemporary structures that use the same techniques. The knowledge demonstrated in the Longyou Caves appears to exist in isolation, applied to this one project, then seemingly forgotten or deliberately suppressed. This is historically anomalous. When a civilization develops engineering expertise, that knowledge typically spreads, becomes standardized, appears in multiple projects across regions and time periods. The Romans built aqueducts across their empire, all using similar principles. The Egyptians built pyramids for centuries, refining techniques across generations. The Chinese themselves have numerous examples of architectural traditions that persisted and evolved over dynasties. But the expertise demonstrated in the Longyou Caves appears nowhere else. It is a singular achievement, isolated in time and space, without precedent and without succession. The historical silence surrounding the caves is perhaps even more baffling than the technical mysteries. China's historical record-keeping is legendary. The tradition of official court historians dates back to the Shang dynasty, more than 3,000 years ago. These historians maintained detailed chronicles called the 24 Histories, comprehensive annals that recorded imperial decrees, military campaigns, natural disasters, construction projects, diplomatic missions, and countless other aspects of Chinese civilization. Local gazetteers provided additional documentation at the provincial and county level, recording regional events, notable individuals, geographical features, and significant landmarks. Private scholars, poets, and officials kept diaries, wrote memoirs, composed essays. The volume of historical documentation from ancient China is vast, detailed, and remarkably complete compared to most other ancient civilizations. Yet nowhere in this enormous corpus of documentation is there a single mention of the Longyou Caves. Not in imperial records, not in local gazetteers, not in private writings, not in poetry, not in folklore recorded by literati. Nothing. For a project of this magnitude to escape documentation is not merely unlikely, it borders on impossible. Consider the logistics that would have been required. A workforce of hundreds or thousands of people would have needed to be recruited, trained, fed, housed, and supervised. Such a workforce could not have been assembled in secret. Families would have noticed when their sons, husbands, or fathers left for extended periods. Local agriculture would have been affected by the labor drain. Food supplies would have needed to be procured and transported to feed the workers. Tool makers would have been commissioned to produce chisels, hammers, baskets, rope, and other equipment. All of this economic activity would have left traces in the historical record, in tax documents, in merchant accounts, in population registers. Furthermore, if the project was sponsored by imperial authority, as the scale and sophistication suggest it must have been, there would have been palace records, treasury documents showing expenditures, official reports on construction progress, court debates about resource allocation. If it was a military project, there would be military records, strategic documents, reports from generals or garrison commanders. If it was a private venture by a wealthy aristocrat or merchant family, there would be family records, financial accounts, estate inventories. Every possible sponsor of such a project would have generated documentation. Yet we have found none of it. The only plausible explanations are either that all records were deliberately destroyed, which would itself require explanation and would likely leave some trace evidence of the destruction, or that the project was conducted with such extreme secrecy that it avoided all documentation, which seems logistically impossible for something of this scale. Some researchers have proposed that perhaps the caves do appear in historical records, but under a different name or described in terms we do not recognize. Ancient texts sometimes use poetic or metaphorical language, and it is possible that a reference to the underground palace or the hidden chambers of the mountain might actually refer to the Longyou Caves. Scholars have combed through thousands of ancient texts searching for any possible reference, any hint, any clue. They have found tantalizing possibilities, vague mentions of mysterious structures or ambitious projects, but nothing that definitively identifies the Longyou Caves. The historical silence remains unbroken. This absence of documentation raises profound questions about what else might be missing from the historical record. If a project this massive, this ambitious, this technically sophisticated could be completed and then erased from history, what else might we be missing? How many other major achievements, how many other monuments, how many other technological accomplishments have been lost, not to physical destruction, but to documentary silence? The Longyou Caves were lost for 2,000 years, not because they were destroyed, but because they were forgotten, because knowledge of their existence failed to be transmitted across generations, because whatever records existed were lost, destroyed, or suppressed. They survived only by accident, discovered only because a farmer decided to drain a pond that no one had bothered to drain before. How many other such sites remain undiscovered, buried beneath fields, forests, or cities, waiting for an accident of fate to bring them back into human awareness? The psychological impact of standing inside these caves, knowing their history, knowing the mysteries that surround them, is profound. Visitors often report feeling overwhelmed, not just by the physical scale, but by the weight of unknowing. These are human-made spaces, created by people who lived and breathed and worked and thought, yet those people have become invisible to us, erased so completely that we cannot even name them, cannot even guess at their motives, cannot reconstruct their lives beyond the silent testimony of carved stone. The caves become a mirror for our own ignorance, a reminder that history is not a complete story, but a fragmentary collection of surviving evidence, much of it lost, much of it misinterpreted, much of it still waiting to be found. And in that realization, in that confrontation with the limits of our knowledge, the Longyou Caves transform from a mere archaeological curiosity into something more profound, a monument to the mystery of the human past, to the ambitions and achievements of people whose names we will never know, whose purposes we may never understand, but whose legacy endures in stone, in silence, in questions that may never be answered. The magnitude of the Longyou Caves leaves us breathless, but it is in the technology, the silent language of cut stone, the evidence embedded in every chisel groove, that the true depth of the mystery is revealed. Technical impossibility, not just scale, is what has turned the Longyou Caves into a riddle that taunts every expert. As we pass from the overwhelming shock at the sheer size of these voids, another, sharper question gnaws at the mind. How could these ancient builders, with nothing but the roughest of hand tools, conjure such perfection from raw sandstone? How did they do it, and why has every trace of their process vanished, like footprints blown away in a storm? Begin by looking closely at the marks themselves. Every wall, every pillar, every ceiling is covered by a grid of parallel grooves, angled lines so regular they could have been cut by a machine, not a human hand. Modern engineers and stonemasons have traced these grooves and calculated their spacing 10 to 15 centimeters apart, slanting across rock faces at a perfect 60-degree angle, ending only where a corner, a pillar, or another architectural feature interrupts the flow. It is an aesthetic that appears nowhere else in ancient Chinese architecture. More profoundly, it is a signature of process, a record of an unknown technique. Consider what it means. Primitive chisels, when pounded against sandstone thousands of times, do not usually leave such clarity. They dull, they shatter, they slip. Multiple workers, laboring for years or decades, introduce variability. They tire, they make mistakes, they take shortcuts. Yet here, over 1 million square meters of surface area, the technique never wavers. Whether by strict oversight, standardized training, or perhaps some mechanical guide we no longer understand, the workers of Longyou maintained a discipline that seems inhuman. It is not just the mark of skilled labor, but of a unified vision, a kind of architectural will that tolerates neither error nor improvisation. Inside the silence of these caves, we find not just the absence of human debris, but a deeper absence, the erasure of technological evidence. No tools have ever been recovered, no abandoned implements, no shards of bronze or iron, nothing to hint at the devices that shaped these stones. Tool marks suggest chisel, yet the known tools of the era, simple copper or bronze implements, would have required unthinkable time and effort, and would themselves have littered the caves by the hundreds, if not thousands. The original builders were meticulous not only in their creation, but in their cleanup. If they broke a tool, they took it with them. If they rested, they left no sign. The caves are like a stage perfectly swept after the last performance, the actors vanishing without a bow. But examine the clues left behind. The cave's ceilings are pitched at a calculated 45-degree angle, a choice both structurally efficient and visually arresting. The placement of pillars, instead of being arbitrary, reveals an understanding of weight distribution that rivals modern civil engineering. Thin walls, sometimes just half a meter thick, separate voids as large as gymnasiums, yet have withstood not only their own mass, but 2,000 years of shifting earth and violent earthquakes. These are not the ad hoc guesses of beginners, but the confident assertions of masters. The hydraulic engineering is just as elegant. Subtle grooves carved into the stone floors direct water away from vulnerable areas. Channeling systems, now partly obscured by centuries of silt, hint at a clear, flowing logic. The caves remain astonishingly dry, evidence that the builders anticipated the region as seasonal floods and relentless humidity. Someone, millennia ago, understood both stone and water, thinking centuries ahead, planning for endurance. This is the unseen hand of experience, of trial and error now lost to oblivion. Yet the caves persist, dry and secure, long after surface structures have crumbled and vanished. Another mystery, the lighting problem. Go deep enough inside any cave and darkness becomes absolute. To cut stone in those conditions, workers would have needed a steady source of illumination. Yet the ceilings and walls are pristine, unscarred by soot, unstained by oils or resins. In other ancient tunnels, you find the blackening of torches, the greasy residue of lamps. Here, the stone is impossibly clean. Theories bloom and die a system of polished mirrors to guide sunbeams down twisting stairs. A top-down excavation with roofs finished last, perhaps the deployment of unknown chemicals or resins that burned smoke-free. None are convincing, for each introduces new complications or contradicts established geological evidence. No mirror fragments have been found, no lamp residue, no remnants of an innovation lost to history. The caves simply are, as if they were shaped in the dark by hands that could see without light. If you tally the labor, the logistics become daunting. A rough calculation: 1 million cubic meters of rock must be broken, lifted, hauled away. Even with a modern labor force, this project would be brutal, slow, and expensive. For ancient workers using nothing but baskets, muscle power, and primitive ramps, the number of man-hours soars into the millions. Each chisel mark is a testament not just to strength, but to patience, to years spent toiling under unyielding stone. And yet, no supporting infrastructure has been found above ground, no spoil heaps, no shattered tools, no temporary barracks. Where did the stone go? Where did the people sleep, eat, bury their dead? The landscape around Longyou is silent, as if the site was constructed, then the earth carefully restored, scars smoothed, memories wiped clean. With every solved detail, a deeper confusion sets in. Modern analysis indicates a consistency of execution that is almost industrial. Every cave, regardless of its position within the complex, displays the same architectural grammar, the same slopes, the same pillars, the same ornamental chisel grooves. This is planning, not improvisation. Was there a central authority? A single architect or master builder? If so, Where are their records, their blueprints, their stories? In China, a civilization famed for its bureaucracy and history, such an individual would have left some imprint written, oral, or at least legendary. But there is none. The minds behind Longyou remain blank faces, their motives, their methods, even their culture untraceable. Historians dig through the royal annals and local gazetters of the Han Dynasty, searching for hidden references, ambiguous phrases, forgotten poems. Perhaps somewhere in a neglected scroll, mention is made of a monarch's tomb, a secret arsenal, or an imperial refuge. Perhaps the chambers of the earth or the palace beneath the hills allude to projects like Longyou, coded for secrecy. But no candidate fits. The bureaucratic machinery of ancient China, which documented everything from grain harvests to imperial dreams, records no such feat. How could a project of this scale, requiring so much money, so many lives, so long a time pass in total silence? Some speculate deliberate erasure, the destruction of records, the murder of all who knew, the systematic elimination of memory itself. But methods that thorough would themselves leave clues, traces of burning, missing volumes, unexplained silences echoing elsewhere. We find none. Only emptiness. Theories multiply. Some propose the caves were royal storehouses, crafted in secrecy to hide treasures or weapons in a time of war, then abandoned and forgotten when peace returned or dynasties changed. Yet no artifacts, inscriptions, or defensive features appear. Others suggest burial chambers for a mighty king, an underground mausoleum on the scale of those built for pharaohs and emperors. But neither body nor treasure nor ritual object remains. Still more daring voices whisper of cults, secret societies, ancient engineers with knowledge lost to time, or even visitors from beyond, though these last suggestions win more ridicule than converts. Archaeologists test more grounded theories. Could the caves be ancient mines, left empty after valuable minerals were extracted? The structure says no. Mines do not require such symmetry, do not carve perfect walls and uniform pillars, do not coordinate the removal of stone into harmonious chambers. Perhaps they were shelters, meant to protect from weather, invasion, or catastrophe, constructed in fear and used only once. That would explain the lack of occupation debris. But why build on such a scale, with such effort, if only for an emergency that never came? It is an answer that begs its own questions. Then there is the riddle of the missing stone. 1 million cubic meters must have been deposited somewhere, reused as masonry, or hidden in vast spoil heaps. Yet satellite surveys, ground-penetrating radar, and old-fashioned fieldwork have located nothing of the kind. The rocks of Longyou did not build an empire's walls or cities. They left, leaving only voids in their wake, their destination a secret as tightly held as the history of the caves themselves. The caves present another most unsettling mystery of all, the pattern of absolute uniformity. All 24 caves echo the same design language, with every groove, every angle, every spatial relationship repeated with an almost compulsive faithfulness. This suggests not just a shared plan, but enforcement, oversight, perhaps even fear of deviation, of failure, of a standard enforced from above with consequences severe enough to ensure unbending compliance. Was this the work of a single mind, a mad king's dream, a cult's sacred mandate? Or does it reflect a society, now lost, where social pressure, ritual, or law demanded repetition, symmetry, the subordination of individual art in favor of collective perfection? We cannot say. This is the heart of the Longyou mystery. Archaeology, usually so adept at reconstructing societies from fragments, fails here, confronted with a completeness that is its own silence. The caves give us no art, no inscriptions, no bones or ashes or tools or discarded rubbish. They give us only the evidence of labor, an architectural tombstone razed to the anonymous ambitions of its creators. We are left with the shapes in stone, the cold mathematics of volume and angle, the chill realization that something extraordinary happened here, then was erased so thoroughly that even legend cannot remember its reason. And still, the caves endure, outlasting dynasty after dynasty, emperor after emperor, the rise and fall of cities built and destroyed on the surface above. They survive not as an artifact to be catalogued and explained, but as a challenge, a riddle set into the very bones of the earth, waiting for a voice clever enough, or fate kind enough, to supply the missing answer. In the next breath, the past gathers itself into stone, sealed for 2,000 years, not just from the world's eyes, but from its memory. The Longyou Caves beckon. There are only questions, multiplying in the dark, as endless as the grooves chiseled into the sandstone. Each step inside leads deeper, not only underground, but into the unknown and into the mind of a builder whose name, purpose, and fate we may never know. As the stone whispers its silence and each answered question crumbles into dust, we find ourselves drawn unavoidably into speculation. The mind recoils from pure uncertainty, inventing stories to govern the shadow. Theories arise not mere academic hypotheses, but dramatic tales spinning the darkness into possible forms. The Longyou Caves, with their uniformity and perfection, cry out for explanation. And so we chase the possibilities, each more compelling and more disturbing than the last. Begin with the theory most grounded in historical reality. Were the caves a hidden arsenal, a safeguard for weapons in a time of war? Some scholars mention the King Gujian of Yue, a ruler renowned for his cunning, who, after defeat in battle, retreated to plan revenge, building secret storage and training sites. Perhaps the Longyou Caves were the vaults where arms, armor, and grain were hidden until the day of reckoning. The dimensions suit the needs of an army, and access was limited, hidden beneath surface ponds and guarded by silence. But if this were true, some trace should remain: arrowheads, blades, signs of drill or military discipline etched into stone. There is none. Caves built for war, yet devoid of war's debris. Then, consider the royal burial hypothesis. China's ancient emperors built mausoleums vast and ornate, underground cities for the dead, filled with tomb guardians, offerings, and symbols of power. If the Longyou Caves were once an acropolis, a resting place for royalty, there should be remnants of ritual pottery shards, gold leaf, bodies laid in state. It would explain the immense labor. It would account for the secrecy. Yet the caves are empty. No bones, no relics, no altars or engraved prayers. The silence is that of absolute removal, not reverent preservation. The third conjecture: an imperial palace or sanctuary, a retreat in times of chaos or disaster. Secret chambers ready to shelter the crowned heads of China should war erupt above. The design of the caves allows concealment, defense, and even sealed-off isolation. But palaces require evidence of occupation: living quarters, furniture, utensils, even the layered dirt of long habitation. None have been found. The caves are architectural, not domestic. No soot, no foot-worn stones, no relics of daily life. Delve still deeper to theories of economic utility. Were these enormous voids royal quarries, mines designed to extract the best stone for imperial building projects? The chisel marks confirm extraction, but not purpose. Quarries are ragged, utilitarian, collapsed in places, shaped by profit, not by symmetry. The Longyou Caves are elegant, harmonious, clearly not designed for simple stone removal. If this was a mine, it was like none other. In the swirl of speculation, some voices, almost whispering, suggest ancient military tunnels, a subterranean Great Wall meant to move troops in secret beneath enemy lines. China's history is rich in underground passageways, tunnels for surprise attack or escape. But the layout of the Longyou Caves defies this purpose. The chambers are not interconnected, not organized as corridors for marching armies. No arrow slits, no defensive choke points, no evidence of combat readiness. They are isolated, architectural, monumental. Even more daring minds speak of lost cults, secret societies, communities who carved these halls for ritual, for mystery, for reasons veiled in the deepest secrecy. Hidden congregations might leave their mark in symbology paintings, niches for offerings, inscriptions of faith. Again, the caves deliver only blank stone. There is no trace of worship, no sign of sect. As science runs thin across the surface of these speculations, wild ideas multiply. Perhaps the caves are the work of not just forgotten peoples, but of forgotten technologies. Some suggest ancient peoples possessed knowledge now lost, engineering methods, materials, or strategies erased by time or deliberate suppression. Or, for the most imaginative and often ridiculed perhaps, the caves are alien, evidence not of humanity, but of something other. That notion is its own kind of emptiness, more fantasy than fact, more homage to mystery than to evidence. And still, the practical questions rear up with every theory. Why was such labor expended in this place, at such a cost, for such unclear utility? If secrecy was vital, why then abandon all evidence that the site had ever mattered? If grandeur was the aim, why erase the record of achievement so thoroughly that all memory failed but the stone itself? These paradoxes become more pressing the longer one studies the caves. Each proposed explanation solves one aspect but explodes new problems. There is also the question of the missing workforce. To shape such chambers required thousands: laborers, overseers, artisans, perhaps soldiers or priests to maintain discipline and secrecy. Where are their stories? Where did they come from? Where did they go? In other great projects, temples, walls, mausoleums, the workers left their mark. Their names appear in records, their bones mingle with the soil, their habits inscribe wear patterns on the stone. In Longyou, they are entirely effaced. The caves are not a palimpsest, not a story overwritten by later generations, but rather a canvas rendered clean as if by deliberate erasure. At this juncture, one must examine the possibility of total suppression. History conditions us to expect that grand works reap grand reputation. But what if the very construction of these caves was a scandal, an error, or a secret deemed too perilous to exist? If an emperor had built these in a moment of madness and then ordered their memory destroyed, we might expect shadows, rumors, even cautionary tales. Yet even echo is absent. The silence is not that of neglect, but of oblivion. Some contemporary scholars confront the ultimate frustration, the idea that too much has disappeared, that the project was deliberately purged, the caves abandoned and left unused. Perhaps the ruling class feared discovery, retribution, or the vulnerability that such complexity might present. Perhaps the knowledge was so advanced that it threatened doctrines, cast doubt on legends, or invited rival powers. What could be gained by forgetting? Save the peace of those who remember too much. Presently, the caves stand not just as a technical riddle, but as a cultural ghost. Modern tourists marvel at their scale, their coolness, their ordered precision. Guides recite theories, laughing off the wilder ones, marveling at the discipline of ancient builders. But some locals still tell hushed stories of forbidden chambers, of treasures gone, of imperial secrets, and a few historians still search the records, hoping for an overlooked line, a neglected poem, a passing reference to chambers so large 1,000 men could fit. Each new theory is marked with disappointment as much as hope. And so we circle ever closer to the sense of awe that Longyou inspires. Theories breed wonder as much as anxiety. An arsenal prepared for war, then abandoned. A forgotten tomb, left barren. A palace of grandeur, erased by law or resigned to nature. An engineering marvel, built and buried for reasons lost. Each theory is a prism, casting the caves in a different light, revealing new shadows, but never dispelling the mystery. The emptiness becomes itself the fascination, a void not only of stone, but of answers. The caves endure, as cool and inscrutable as ever, wearing their silence like a shroud. They survive not as a monument to knowledge, but to the unanswered proof that humans are capable of wonders, and of forgetting both why and how those wonders came to be. Each line of inquiry reveals a deeper need, not just for historical truth, but for the comfort of explanation, the relief that comes from mapping the unknown, even if only by legend. In seeking the purpose of Longyou, we confront the limitations of our own imagination. The caves are as they were designed and left, perfect, enigmatic, empty. We do not know, and perhaps we never will. But it is in this not knowing, this churning of possibility, that the caves become most alive, haunting us not with the ghosts of the past, but with the ghosts of our own desire to know, to master, to understand. Longyou remains, waiting, inviting, defying history, with the power of its vast unanswered question. From the depths of speculation, where theories collide and certainty seems forever out of reach, the ever-present riddle of the Longyou Caves presses us to seek answers through the lens of modern science. If our ancestors erased intention from stone, today archaeologists, geologists, and engineers have learned to interrogate silence itself. It is not enough to wonder. The challenge now becomes to measure, analyze, and test every clue left behind. In this pursuit, every advance of technology becomes a key, sometimes unlocking a door, sometimes revealing yet another chamber of mystery. The story of contemporary investigation begins with careful mapping. The exact dimensions, the orientation of each cave, the thickness of every wall are painstakingly recorded. Laser scanning captures not only architecture, but even the subtle wear of the chisel marks, now weathered but never erased. Three-dimensional reconstructions allow engineers to run simulations, modeling how weight passes from pillar to floor, how seismic waves ripple through the sandstone, how water, if not for the perfect channels, would seep, pool, and destroy. These models confirm what the ancient builders seem somehow to have understood. Instinctively, the structures are robust, over-engineered for survival. Calculations suggest the caves could survive not only the passing of centuries, but even violent seismic events that would devastate surface structures. The builders planned for a time frame beyond their own lives. Materials analysis uncovers more secrets. Cores of sandstone, drilled from ceiling and wall, reveal no exotic treatments, just ordinary, if consistent, rock. Yet the stone's resilience owes much to the luck of its composition. Solid, fine-grained, relatively soft for carving, but naturally resistant to crumbling under pressure. Even with such material, the labor involved remains inconceivable. New techniques, spectroscopy, micron-level imaging, reveal that the marks left by chisels were made swiftly, cleanly, suggesting not just patience, but an intimate familiarity with the stone. The hand holding that tool did not hesitate. It was not a laborer's uncertainty, but a craftsman's confidence. Still, the central questions return. Who worked here, and where did the evidence of their presence go? Archaeologists equipped with ground-penetrating radar and chemical sensors sweep the surrounding land for clues. A faint trace of carbon, perhaps, could signal a hearth, a scattering of broken pottery, the vestige of a meal. But the landscape yields almost nothing. The few pottery fragments found nearby are generic, datable only to broad eras, able to anchor nothing to the caves themselves. There are no trash pits, no waste heaps from the quarrying of stone, no bone or ash to mark the passing of life. The surface remains as unwilling to speak as the depths below. Scientific scrutiny turns next to the search for clues of when. Standard radiocarbon dating relies on organic material, but in Longyou, even this seems denied. There is so little residue for dating because no one seems to have lived here, left their mark, or died in these spaces. The construction, by design or fate, was antiseptic. Instead, researchers must rely on indirect strategies. They examine thin film deposits on the stone, the slow accumulation of minerals in the airless dark, measuring layer by layer the story of dampness, of chemical exchange, of microscopic life taking root and dying back. The best estimates built from these slow-growing films, from the erosion patterns left by groundwater, from the rare pottery sherd nearby, all cluster around 2,000 years, the late Warring States or early Han Dynasty. But even these numbers cannot eliminate the sense that something is missing. The caves could be older or younger, their secret hidden in absences. Attempts at explanation grow ever more ingenious. Some propose that the entire project was accomplished by a transient labor force brought in, paid in secrecy, perhaps slaves or prisoners, erased by their own poverty or by violence. Others speculate a religious order, sworn to secrecy, departing when their work was done. Some even suggest that the caves were never used for any practical purpose, at all art for art's sake, a monument to human will, rendered anonymous by deliberate intention. The drainage system receives special study. Hydrologists trace the channels and slopes with fine instruments, filming the movement of dye-colored water through the grooves, mapping exactly how rainfall and groundwater are conducted away, down, and out of sight. The system works so well that when local farmers first drained the ponds above, the chambers remained dry, not even a trickle of standing water where it might be expected after centuries. Such sophistication points not only to technical skill, but to careful, large-scale planning. Modern urban infrastructure often fails to achieve comparable long-term reliability. Analysis of the cave's acoustics adds another layer to the mystery. Researchers bring in microphones, speakers, and computers, mapping out how sound propagates through each chamber. They discover not simply silence, but complex resonance, distinct standing waves, pockets where a whisper magnifies, places where a shout is swallowed by geometry. Was this intentional? Was sound meant to inspire awe, or to cloak movement, or to serve some unknown purpose in ritual or labor? There is no way to be sure, but once again, someone shaped these chambers with more in mind than simply empty space. Biologists search for the telltale signatures of ancient presence pollens, spores, DNA left by people brushing against stone. Yet if any vital clues remain, they are so faint as to be indecipherable. Traces dissolve under the relentless passage of time, or under the scrubbing hand of those who so effectively erased themselves. Meanwhile, historians revisit their labyrinth of texts. They explore obscure chronicles, family records, folk traditions, even the oral histories passed among locals. Nothing matches in detail, though ghostly references linger, stories of forbidden spaces, warnings never to dig too deep, memories of officials who vanished after asking questions. Such tales are everywhere and nowhere, the collective noise of a culture whispering about what must not be remembered. Technology, for all its power, cannot conjure evidence from nothing, but it does allow new ways to ask. Advanced simulations project how an army of workers could, if sufficiently motivated and organized, conceal their presence, removing all physical traces. Models reconstruct possible methods for moving stone without leaving spoil heaps. Perhaps the rock was carted to the nearby river, dumped and carried far downstream, lost forever to history. Or perhaps it became the invisible stone underpinning vanished ancient structures. Centuries gone, their ruins mingled now with the residue of every dynasty. There are limits to this imagining. Even the best models cannot account for silence so complete. The more the data accumulate, the more the caves seem to recede, their facts dissolving into the very ambiguity that makes them unique. Where factual certainty falters, modern science does not offer frustration, but humility. The caves are a boundary, a test not only of ancient engineering, but of the capacity of modern inquiry to accept mystery. Yet, little by little, every analysis, every simulation, every scan peels away faint layers. We begin to grasp not answers, but the edges of possibility. The builders of Longyou, whoever they were, lived at the edge of what was thought possible. Daredevils, visionaries, or perhaps wretched servants of power, moved by a vision or forced by a command so absolute that not even memory was allowed to remain. Their silence is, perhaps, a story in itself, a kind of engineering of oblivion, just as precise as the chisel work on every wall. Tourists today wander the spaces with headlamps and cameras, touching stone that once echoed to the rhythm of 1,000 hammers. Guides recount the best scientific guesses, raise questions none can answer, and sometimes, in the hush of subterranean twilight, visitors sense the tension beneath the stone, a feeling that meaning hovers just out of reach. In the final accounting, it is not only the past that is mysterious, but the present, too. Science can measure every detail, but must accept that some histories are not recoverable. Some plans are lost, some names erased, some stories too thoroughly hidden. The Longyou Caves are less a monument to knowledge than a testament to forgetting a blank page, balancing the weight of fact and the pull of legend. And still, investigation continues, relentless. Engineers refine simulations, archaeologists keep scanning, historians keep reading. Each generation, armed with new tools, expects they will be the ones to break the silence. But for now, what endures is the enigma, maintained by the refusal of stone to offer up the final key. The Longyou Caves are not just a puzzle for science. They are a lesson in humility for those who seek closure where nature and humanity together have chosen, purposefully or not, to leave only questions. If science provides instruments for probing the silence of Longyou, it is the realm of questions, the vast, cascading, ever-multiplying interrogatives that ultimately define the contours of its enigma. As modern investigation reaches the limits of excavation, simulation, and analysis, the caves persist, daring us to confront a more unnerving form of mystery. Not simply what we cannot prove, but what we may never know. This is not the uncertainty of guesswork, but the precision of unresolvable doubt, each question sharpening the focus of the unknown. Here, the mind turns from the tools of science to the architecture of inquiry itself. Each unanswered question stands as a column, supporting the cathedral of mystery. The count grows the 10 unanswered questions, each more haunting when set in the context of everything that previous generations of researchers, and now our own, have failed to answer. First, who was the architect? Not a single signature, no scratch of a name, no stylized mark has ever been found in the caves. Most great ancient works are carved with their maker's pride, or at least the claim of an emperor or a god. The Longyou Caves contain only the perfection of form no human touch that admits to authorship. The silence here is both defiance and invitation, as if the builder believed anonymity itself was a kind of immortality. Second, when were the caves constructed? All datings are derivative accretions of dust, fragments of shattered pottery, subtle variations in stone weathering. Radiocarbon analysis, even with the latest methods, yields only a window, not a date. 2,000 years, more or less, but the range could flex by centuries. Even this estimate is shadowed by the possibility of deliberate concealment or more recent interventions, erasing what little time is left. Third, why construct such immense voids, with such labor, with so little apparent use? The absence of occupation debris hints the caves were never meant for daily life. They are not homes, not barracks, not granaries filled and emptied over seasons. Their scale is architectural, but without function. Intentional emptiness becomes itself a kind of statement, a work created not to shelter, but to awe, to challenge, or perhaps to outlast even the memory of its own purpose. Fourth, where is the stone? Every cubic meter removed from the earth must end somewhere. At Longyou, both the material and the signature of its removal have vanished. If it was dumped in river or field, no trace remains. If carted away for construction, no building, temple, or road claims it. The disappearance is not a matter of bad record-keeping, but of a material gone as completely as its makers. Fifth, how did the builders avoid catastrophic collapse, especially in chambers so closely spaced, separated by the thinnest of walls? Modern construction, with cranes and steel, would struggle to replicate such stability. Old as they are, the caves have survived earthquakes, floods, the relentless pressure of shifting earth. This is knowledge compounded by intuition, or the inheritance of methods now departed from living memory. Sixth, what lighting was used? In the other tombs and mines of the ancient world, soot blackens the ceiling's evidence of oil lamps or torches. Yet in every room of Longyou, the stone is unmarked. Experiments with mirrors and channels falter. Chemical tests reveal nothing. Not resin, not pitch. If a lost technique existed, it left no signature, just perfect grooves scored in darkness. Seventh, why is there no official record? China's inscribal culture is almost unparalleled in its detail, recording projects large and small, for emperors and commoners alike. Not a single line in the ancient annals, not a whisper in provincial records, not a line in poetry marks the making of these caves. The bureaucratic silence is as absolute as the material one a double erasure, as if memory itself was forbidden. Eighth, what logistics enabled such massive labor? Thousands would be needed. Not just diggers, but specialists, overseers, tool makers, cooks, water carriers, healers, guards. The requirements for feeding, housing, policing that workforce boggle the mind, especially in an era of limited transport and communication. Yet the fields above the caves show nothing. No foundation for barracks, no field for markets, no cemetery for those who fell. It is as if the earth healed itself, erasing all scars. Ninth, how was such uniformity enforced? Across all 24 caves, not just the angles and pillars, but the pattern of chisel marks is exactly replicated. Did workers follow precise diagrams? Were they trained to absolute standards? Or did a master walk the halls, inspecting every groove for deviation? The culture of compliance must have been unyielding, with consequences severe enough to suppress even momentary rebellion. 10th, why obliterate all evidence? If secrecy was essential, if the caves were military, religious, or political in function, why abandon without ritual destruction? Why is there no evidence of panic, of rushed collapse, or of treasures removed in haste? Here, too, the emptiness is too pure, too complete to be mere neglect. But the list does not end at 10. Each core question splits into sub-questions about material, about labor, about technology, about memory. The further one pushes, the more it becomes clear that the enigma is not a riddle to solve, but a landscape to explore. Longyou's mystery is fractal. Every answer offers not closure, but recursion, an infinite regression into uncertainty. And so, contemporary researchers present these 10 and more, not as an indictment of ancient opacity, but as a challenge for present and future inquiry. The caves stand as a physical place and a metaphysical puzzle, inviting generations to project meaning onto blank stone, to construct narratives where evidence is denied. In this sense, Longyou is perhaps the most modern of mysteries. It is not the ruin of a civilization, nor the remnant of a lost religion, nor even the echo of a vanished conquest. It is, above all, a space in which meaning is suspended, intention multiplied, and every attempt at narrative is stricter about what to leave out than what to include. For visitors today, the passage through the caves is also a journey through the limits of knowledge. Each carefully carved groove, Each echo in the stone, each perfectly proportioned chamber, speaks not only of what humans once built, but of what we can only imagine. In the hush, in the careful footsteps, in the hush that follows every question, we hear our own capacity for wonder and the ever-present pull of the unknown. Longyou taunts us, in the end. Its silence is not just the void left by unanswered questions, but a kind of promise that as long as there are minds willing to ask, the mystery will live. The caves are not just an ancient structure. They are, and will always be, the architecture of the unsolved. Through all the passageways of mystery, through every echo that reverberates off the immaculate walls, the journey into the Longyou Caves arrives now at its quietest, most haunting epicenter, the human reflection left behind by stone. After all the questions, all the emptiness, all the science and speculation, the enigma of Longyou asks not only what happened here, but what does it mean to us? This mystery is not a static artifact, but a living, trembling tension between knowing and not knowing, a tension felt deeply by anyone who has wandered its depths or traced its story. At the threshold of philosophy, every viewer stands in the darkness, not only before a marvel of ancient engineering, but in relation to its creators, anonymous voices speaking through absence. We search for that spark of intention, hoping for a message left in patterns, for secrets inscribed in form. Yet the caves resist us, holding their purpose close, refusing to surrender reason or narrative. In this resistance, something profound emerges, a confrontation with the limits not just of knowledge, but of meaning itself. We recall Wu Anai, the farmer whose chance curiosity drained a pond, uncovering an entrance sealed for centuries. His footsteps, hesitant, uncertain, became the first marks made by modern humanity in the untouched silence. As he descended those impossible stairs, followed by neighbors and strangers, the world shifted just a little. A boundary of ignorance split open, exposing the vast unknown beneath. Is this perhaps the most essential power held by these voids? Not simply the ability to preserve a secret, but to change the lives of all who uncover it, to move the axis of wonder in a new direction. In the twilight of reflection, the caves stand as testament to the ambitions, fears, and ingenuity of a people lost to history. Yet even as their creators vanish, the mark of their will is unmistakable. The stone surfaces, shaped for endurance not just of time, but of memory, speak of a desire not toward utility or glory, but toward something greater, surpassing even the ego of emperors and the pageant of dynasties. Perhaps the Longyou Caves are not meant to be solved. Perhaps they were always meant to remain, unclaimed by narrative, a monument to human reach. Visitors today, pressed by the hush and the cold resonance, feel a stirring at the edges of understanding. The awe is contagious, a sense of standing in a place outside time, buffered against the noise and rush of life above ground. The silence itself acquires weight, texture, a force strong enough to slow the pulse and still the mind. The questions who, why, how fall silent, replaced by a wonder not of ignorance, but of humility. To accept that some stories cannot be finished, that some mysteries work best when they remain untouched, is to discover a new kind of meaning. It is the meaning of the unanswerable, the wisdom of uncertainty. There are those who bring loved ones, children, elders to the caves. They whisper stories, share theories, and invent their own endings. Each visitor, in their own way, adds a footprint to the threshold of mystery, carrying a fragment of it back out into the world. Teachers challenge students to solve the impossible. Poets compose verses on the beauty of absence. Engineers reconcile their craving for explanation against the geometry that remains mute. The mystery migrates, grows, multiplies, living on not just in stone, but in minds and memories remade by the refusal to be simple. Longyou thus becomes a mirror. In its polished emptiness, we see ourselves not just as seekers, but as architects of wonder, as makers and keepers of the same frail ambition that once moved the hands gripping those ancient chisels. The caves are eternal, not because they are unanswered, but because they are inexhaustible, capable of bearing every interpretation, every legend, every hope and fear that we hang upon them. When we look back, when we close the circuit of this story, we grasp the most delicate thread, the fusion of past and present inside a question. The caves endure, surviving time, silence, and the erasure of memory, standing as the last guardians of a mystery that challenges every certainty. For the scholar, the engineer, the storyteller, and especially the dreamer, Longyou will always be a place not just of facts to be catalogued, but of imagination set free. So let us return in closing to the image of the stairs, half buried, cutting down into emptiness. Let us remember the figure of the farmer, the curiosity of neighbors, the first exploration beneath the drained water. Let us see in their steps our own longing for discovery, our willingness to descend, to risk confusion and awe in search of meaning. Maybe as the centuries pass, the ultimate secret of Longyou will remain locked in stone, a challenge to future generations yet unborn. But just as likely, the true measure of this mystery is not in the answers withheld, but in the doors it opens inside us, the courage to pursue the unknown, the humility to accept its boundaries, and the reverence for a past whose deepest magic lies in its refusal to be tamed. And as we leave the caves, emerging once again into the light, we carry not closure, but transformation. The final step is not a solution, but a turning point, an acknowledgement that the greatest mysteries are not the ones waiting to be solved, but the ones that shape us by their enduring presence. The stairs descend into darkness, but they also rise, leading us upward toward a horizon where wonder and curiosity will always be waiting, undiminished.